Welcome to the Brand Equity Martech Dialogue. Partnered by WebEngage, this initiative brings leading marketeers together to debate and discuss the new age possibilities and tech-led opportunities in a fast-evolving marketing ecosystem. Thank you for joining us. Please extend a warm welcome to our eminent panel.
Thank you for joining us in this discussion. My name is Pooja, Jauhari, and I'm the Chief Creative Officer for a digital-first organization called The Glitch. We are a progressive, diverse, gender-blind, high-performance workspace, and I'm extremely excited to be part of this discussion. The topic today is what goes into creating a loved digital brand. It's a hot topic. Everyone's discussing this, and we have some very, very interesting panelists here. But this is brought to you by Brand Equity, and these are their Martech dialogues. I'm excited that because this is not going to be just another panel where we go from question to question, but I'm encouraging all of us to have an open dialogue on this subject. So very quickly, before I get into an introduction on the panel, let's just a little bit of a reflection on the world, right? Our world has changed, no doubt. But all around me, as a creative person, I see fantastic examples of how brands are learning, evolving, and in some cases, rapidly growing in this new world. In today's discussion, my hope is to bring to you a look at how some important businesses like banking, food and beverage, voice entertainment, and e-com have evolved their businesses and, most importantly, their customer experience, while setting themselves up to become loved digital brands. Delighted to introduce my fantastic panelists. I'm going to start with Vikas Gupta. Hi, Vikas. Very nice to see you here. Head of Customer Marketing and Digital Businesses at Flipkart. He leads the Customer Engagement and Marketing Charter at Flipkart. That's a fantastic business to be in right now. It's obviously instrumental in bringing a world-class shopping experience to over 1 billion Indians. Congratulations on that. I'm moving on to Dilen Gandhi as a senior director and category head at PepsiCo India for foods at PepsiCo India. Is responsible for spearheading growth, leading end-to-end marketing and P&L for PepsiCo's India's largest portfolio. Having been associated with PepsiCo for over 4 years, Dilen leads a cross-functional team to shape the future of the Indian snacks market. Very interesting space to be in as well, Dilen. A lot of work that I have personally done in that space. I'm excited to hear the movements that Pepsi has brought about. I'm moving on to Ravi. Ravi is the Chief Marketing Officer at HDFC Bank, who is at the forefront of the brand's digital transformation journey. He's responsible for analytics, brand and communication, and digitizing the entire customer experience at one of India's biggest brands. And for my last introduction is Neha Ahuja. I'm a big fan of the work that you do, by the way, and she is a marketing leader with over 16 years of experience and legacy with FMCG brands. As the head of marketing at Spotify, she has been instrumental in making the newest entrant in the Indian music streaming industry one of the buzziest brands in the country. And I couldn't agree more, because when Spotify came into the country, I know all of us were like, we need to get onto that 3-month spot of those codes that you were giving out. So I was one of the people that actually went after it. So I'm so excited to have all of you on board. And guys, the first discussion that I want to open up to all of you, and Ravi, we can start with you, is really describe how your customers actually changed. Because yes, there's so much conversation about how the world has changed, how everything has evolved, but really, has your customer changed? Are you seeing real changes in the marketplace?
Of the opinion, there are 2-3 very clear instances of behavior that we all see. And the first one which we see is there is a huge movement towards safety. And that is because of the fact that people's anxiety levels as well as fear levels have increased. And if I had seen a lot of senior citizens coming into the branches, and if they're not coming, that is only because of this. So that's the way, if you see the attitude and the behavior is reflected in terms of people not walking in. If you also see people are covering up their face, people are hand sanitizing and everything, this shows that this fear and anxiety levels are at a very elevated level, and that we can see. And when we reach out to our customers, the first question everybody is asking is like, are you okay? Everything in the family is okay. And that would have been a very nice conversation when I called you, maybe say before the pandemic. But when I call you today and when I want to ask that question, I'm feeling very bad that I'm asking that question, which was not the case when you asked the question earlier. that actually has pushed the safety aspect of whatever we do, the safety and security aspect, to a large level, to a heightened level of awareness. And as a bank, that's good for me. But as a society, do I want to be in this space? I don't want to be in this space.
Thank you for that. I want, because it's, Ravi spoke about safety. With banking and people going to the bank is obviously a change, but you have had to change the way you interact with your customer, especially at the end, the last goal where you're talking about, hey, I'm going to do contactless delivery for you. I'm going to leave things outside. I'm going to be far away for you, but I'm still going to offer you a service. Really, how has that? I've been very curious to understand, how did you really brief the last mile of your team to be prepared for a dialogue like that?
Thank you so much, Pooja. Thank you for inviting me as well here. I think these are unprecedented times, and when things get tough, that is when good organizations, good teams sort of come up and meet that challenge in a lot of ways. I think the way we have seen, I fully agree with what Ravi said. I think the concern regarding safety, interaction with other human beings, it could just be taking a package. It could also be exchanging cash. And in our case, it's not just delivery. We also, let's say, if somebody's buying an air conditioner, we also will come and install in your house. So you're not even letting your friends come into your house. How would you allow somebody who's a stranger to come into your house and install? So there have been massive changes in terms of the pain points, the barriers that people have, although at the same time the need to buy through e-commerce because the other channels are really not available. And I think lots of changes have happened in terms of the way the company has rallied, the team has rallied in terms of not just the business continuity and how do you ensure that you have very safe operations, right, social distancing and all of that. But at the same time, how do you really get the entire team to look at it from a position of enhanced responsibility? I mean, when the lockdown happened, almost overnight, e-commerce was thrust in the space of essential services provider. And I think that has been the rallying cry across the organization, including the last mile. A lot of our last mile wishmasters had gone back to their native hometowns, etc., bringing them back because they felt this sense of additional responsibility that they have towards society, coming up with a lot of innovations. I think no contact delivery or contactless delivery is just one innovation. We had other innovations which were coming from the front line. For example, secondary packaging. The person will come to your door, take away the secondary packaging, so that inside the packaging, he will just leave at your door. So that means that has not been touched. Similarly, we introduced new constructs like buy now, pay later. So cash on delivery was the big thing. And now people were worried about even exchanging currency notes. So we said, you can buy now, you can try your products, and then you can pay later. So a lot of innovations that have happened in this space to take care of consumer worries and this heightened level of awareness around safety and sanitization.
I'm inquisitive to know, have banks and e-com companies spoken with each other? Was there a collaborative effort in making the last mile experience more evolved? Did that happen? I'm curious to know that.
We did talk to other banks across the world before we started, because we had the experience of Europe going on a lockdown much before India happened. And we did learn a lot. And the challenge for banks, as Vikas was telling, is maybe you can shut down e-commerce for 15 days, but banks were not even given that flexibility of shutting. We were supposed to open even during lockdown. And cash is something which we handle in the branch. The rest of the things you don't need to come to the branch anyway.
Yeah.
And there was this huge fear psychosis at that point of time that anything you touch will come. And luckily for us, I think the hats off to all the people who work in banking and specifically across the banking sector. We have always been an essential service. So I think it is there in the blood. And for a person like me who has come from outside banking, the kind of voluntary spontaneity with which the employees go to office, even during these tough times, and handle cash and handle everything is phenomenal. Yes, we did a lot of learning in terms on a daily basis. We are continuously changing the protocols as we learn more. We talk to doctors, and the doctors are also as clueless as you are on day one. Everybody is learning. And I think the agility to learn at scale is what differentiated the good organizations versus the not so great organizations.
I
We were
like
very lucky.
I like that agility to learn at scale. And for PepsiCo, obviously that is. Did those conversations happen? Because when lockdown hit, suddenly we were all rushing to the supermarket. I mean, we've all gone through that, and there was this whole anxiety of let me hoard. I'm sorry, my dogs are barking in the background. They like this discussion. But did you guys was there a dialogue between PepsiCo, Coke, Unilever, GSK? Did you guys were there sharing of strategies as your customer evolved? Did that happen at all?
We do talk to each other at different points of time. I don't think there was difference in approach this time around. The interactions with the rest of the industry tend to be focused on specific topics. From a consumer standpoint, we tend to focus on doing our own thing mostly. And for us, obviously, this period was an intense learning curve. But what we kind of have knitted out on is that at the end of the day, where the direction hasn't changed, the consumer was moving in this direction as far as we were seeing, right? Whether you talk about digital adoption, whether you talk about a higher awareness of hygiene, and therefore looking at more packaged food solutions, the direction has always, been there. What changed, obviously, was the acceleration. And this event caused the acceleration of all of that. So that's the kind of paradigm from which or that's a paradigm that we arrived to eventually. And therefore, we were looking at, okay, the variable that has changed is pace, and therefore, how do you adjust to pace? And that's kind of where the entire organization's focus was, that how do you adapt to a significantly faster way of doing things, right? Because what has not changed is the consumer context was always changing, right? Consumer, whether it was printing technology to analog, from analog to digital, the consumer experience has always been changing, and people like us have always had to adapt to that. We just needed to add the element of speed, and for that, I think the paradigm that we kind of adopted was that of iteration. Do something, do it fast, fail, but kind of adjust, iterate, and go out and do it again. And
Fail fast and move on.
Exactly, and once you have a success, and that's the point I think that Ravi made, which was very, I think, which very crucial, because a lot of people talk about failing fast, failing often, building cheap, but scaling rapidly is I think as important. And Vikas is obviously a customer of ours, and we are glad that we had partnerships available with all of our customers in that space, which allowed us to kind of tap into this context, which was always changing, but was accelerated much more.
Thanks for that, Dilen. Now, Neha, the big question to you. Everyone's spoken about accelerated change, partnerships, the entire customer experience changing. I have observed that in lockdown, the amount of podcasts that I have listened to, the kind of music that has just shot through the roof. Is that analogy correct? Is that consistent with people world over?
Yes, I think that's the trend, Pooja. We actually did see the consumption come down a little bit when the lockdown started, because I think the routines had changed a little bit. The biggest use cases, have been driving to work, right? Or running, or, my gym playlist, right? And all these routines were disturbed. So initially, I think we did see the consumption come down a little bit, but I think very, very quickly, we suddenly saw a huge spike in the consumption. And of course, the consumption pattern, the time of the day people were consuming music, and what playlist they were consuming was completely different, right? There was no my drive playlist. It was all about, my cooking playlist, and there were like specific recipe playlists, and then there was working out at home playlist. So yes, the routines changed, and you're absolutely right that, we also did see a huge spike in podcasts. We actually also managed to ingest a lot of new podcasts, Indian originals as well as global. So, that kind of helped the cause as well. But also the way we spoke about it, was that suddenly you had a lot of dead time. A lot of professionals sitting at home and they had to do the chores, they had to do the dishes, and they had to do the cleaning and dusting at home, and sit with their little kids, attending classes. What do they do with that time, right? You don't want to waste that 1 hour just doing dishes. And that was the perfect time to listen to your favorite podcast, to upskill, to sort of motivate yourself, and that's what we actually saw. Yeah.
Any interesting playlists that you would like to announce to us? New ones that were born during the lockdown.
I was discussing this with Sapna from Google, and she said that suddenly we saw a huge spike in the recipes, right? And he said that do you know which recipe is like the most searched? And I said maybe that's the same recipe playlist that we have on Spotify, and it was bang on. So we really know that people during lockdowns were cooking, but they were cooking chanas and cholas the most. And
waiting for street food.
Like now, like a given that this is what was cooked.
I have a question for you, Neha, because I think, is there any change in what people are hearing, and basis that we can say whether people are looking at more reflecting towards life in general? When I listen to in say January, for example, I always had a very different view of the world. Now the world view is very different. So basis what people are listening in terms of the content actually, is there any big change or shift you see in consumers, what they're thinking about future?
No, so you know what? You'll be surprised to see, and we do that, consumption analysis very, very frequently. And we thought that, people will actually be listening to more mellow music and, Sufi music and softer music. But Punjabi hip hop party is as consumed as it was, right? And
this is music to your banker's ears because people will spend.
Yeah, and I think the surprising trend is that when I actually search that where is the workout playlist being used the most, it's Goa. I mean, who is consuming workout playlist in Goa?
I have a point to add there. I have a feeling that 90% of the advertising community has moved to Goa. Everyone's sitting out of Goa. We suddenly have work-life balance, which never existed for us.
Shaping up.
Yeah. We're moving to Goa and we're killing it there. But that was a great insight. You have three important people from the marketing community on this discussion. What would be your advice to them on how to use voice to really speak to this modern consumer?
I'll just add to what Ravi was saying. I think because these are unprecedented times and people are in so much chaos, they are not feeling safe, they are not feeling connected, right? And also we are all on screens and Zoom all the time, right? I think humans, the one mantra that we have followed at Spotify is that the humans are becoming machines, more and more machines. So the brands have to be becoming more and more humans, right? And that we need to show overtly. Show that you empathize with your consumer, right? Show that you understand. And I mean, this is a right forum to talk about it, right? With so much Martech available, you can almost anticipate the needs of the consumer and serve it to them at the right moment, right? And we've done, a couple of product feature changes as well at Spotify. Simple things like, introducing listening together. This was a campaign that we had, during lockdown. We know your favorite star. We know what you're doing because you're making cooking playlists. I know you're cooking, and I know your favorite star is Selena Gomez. We actually reached out to these stars, to these artists, and we said that, can you make your cooking playlist and ingest it into the, the app? Can Arijit make his chill playlist? Can Selena Gomez make her, cooking playlist? Can Led Zepp or Eagles make their workout playlist? And then we almost said cook with Selena Gomez or, chill with Arijit. So you really consume what your artist is consuming and also, enjoy what you're doing then at home.
Your influence somehow becomes a lot more human is what you said, right? Sorry, were you saying something?
Yeah, I was actually, giving another use case of voice. I think voice is becoming more and more prominent in the whole consumer adoption space. And, we are seeing a whole wave of new, users and customers who are not internet savvy. These are people who are coming from tier 3 towns, even below. Their only engagement with internet has been WhatsApp, maybe a bit of YouTube at best, that also probably through WhatsApp. And we have seen that if we engage them through non-traditional means, so not the usual English app to Varnak and then voice within that, the adoption rates that we are seeing in terms of acceleration of their journeys from being these people who are sitting on the fence, not able to figure out how to navigate this complex space, etc., to now engaging through voice with e-commerce and coming on board. And I think COVID has only proliferated and accelerated that trend. So voice is a big use case, and the technology is improving every day. The capabilities are becoming better in terms of understanding people, understanding different dialects, understanding different slangs, and being able to respond and answer and help them in their journey of e-commerce adoptions.
That's absolutely right. And I think it's been critical for a few years now. And, we handle a lot of Unilever business and we know the impact that it has specifically in tier 2 and tier 3 markets. And, I have a question for you, Dilen, on this. And as we're still on voice and a little specific that I really enjoyed in what Neha said is how Spotify and Google spoke to each other. With Neha and Sapna, discussing data, which almost correlated and said, okay, we're both on the same page. That's exactly how customers are behaving. How is that? How are you guys looking at data to evolve your customer experience? And is voice central to that at the moment?
So it's an evolving journey. I think data has become much more central to us, obviously. And the way we look at data is that obviously, as the consumer experience fragments, with the number of channels that the consumer can go and shop at, or consume media at, or engage with each other at, data then becomes our way to kind of converge them all, right? So if you've heard our ad on Spotify, let's say, then you will get served an ancillary piece of content when you're on YouTube, for example. So data becomes for us the kind of convergence point on an increasingly fragmented consumer experience. Voice particularly, I think, it's interesting for us from a number of reasons. We are a large national brand, right? We have millions of transactions in every part of the country, and one of the things that we've picked up is, which goes in line with what Vikas was saying. One of the things that we've picked up is that consumers are becoming a lot more concerned talking about a lot of their local communities. We've known for a while now that nationalism was growing in the country. That's been a trend for about half a decade now. But the nuance that's gotten added in this particular context is the role of the local community. My mohalla, my building, my family, my street, because that's the lowest unit which had to come together to kind of during this kind of crisis. And there, obviously, as we all know, language and the local dialect that you speak is far more important. And therefore, there is a lot of work that we are doing in that space, to kind of tap into that particular insight of how do you speak to people in that very, very local dialect. The other point I think that Neha made, and two aspects of that. I think, the entire aspect of empathy, right? And how, the need for empathy was so high at this point of time. And that actually forced us to pivot also in a lot of different ways. And as we were pivoting, partnering with other, brands, businesses such as ourselves, our partners, was a natural thing to do. And we kind of did a lot of that, whether it was with Google as a part of our hard work campaign, or as, on Lay's hard work, when we reached out to a lot of other brands, including Spotify.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that content campaign, by the way.
Yeah, because the language is very common, right? And Vikas spoke about it, Neha spoke about it. At the end of the day, we're all going through the same thing, and it made total sense to not be so controlling of the platform or the message, to kind of let the message spread a little bit. And I think that did well, not just for us, but also for the cause that we were trying to espouse at that point.
Pooja, I have a slightly different take on voice.
Yeah, please.
Well, people are talking about voice for campaigning, and Vikas was talking about voice from the perspective of people engage. See, the first thing that happened for people like all of us, and particularly for people with transaction industry, is our call centers went down because nobody could come in. So how do we handle that kind of a situation where people were being responded to on a voice? So we have to improve our digital capabilities. So we don't look at voice from a tier 2, tier 3 perspective at all. We look at voice from a tier 1 perspective because our strong belief is conversational banking is the future.
Awesome.
People are going to go into voice because that's the most common interface between two human beings, and man-machine interface will become voice. And if you see the amount of dollars that are being put in Cortana, Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant, that is going to be the future. So we need to create voice-based ability to transact on everywhere. And that's where we thought we will anyway be pushing our direction. And empathy needs to be added to that, and that can be easily added there. Because in the screen, whatever you say as words, empathy beyond a point doesn't come in. In flesh and blood, you can create a lot more empathy. So we are looking at voice from a conversational banking, and the way you can have a conversation in the way you do banking transactions would be of a different level in the future. We see a lot more people face, as Dilen was talking about, we expect the way in which digital will actually be adopted in the country. If I expected 2023, it has come to 2021 now. So it is changing dramatically in terms of how people adopt. So voice will happen, in my view, much, much faster as a medium of interaction between man and machine. Very fast.
Hi, you're leading the way with that. Because it would be interesting to understand empathy is being spoken about a lot. You spoke about it a lot as well. Now, voice and empathy, there, I wrote this down. Conversational banking is the future. Are we saying conversational relationships, advertising is the future? Now, I'm not talking about ads specifically, right? Because that is a one-way dialogue. It's not a conversation. In businesses like e-com specifically, that is also important because customer care is really is right up there. Have you guys made changes in how you speak with customers specifically in a time like this? Has there been specific training that your back offices have gone through, your call centers have gone through specifically in dealing with this crisis?
No, absolutely. I think that is a very important part of the entire customer experience and customer journey. I think, the first port of call was to ensure business continuity, right? Suddenly people couldn't come to offices. We needed to make sure that they are enabled from wherever they are, whether it is in terms of equipment, whether it is in terms of remuneration, whichever way, all the processes needed to quickly evolve almost overnight. And we had to scale up very quickly from enabling infrastructure, enabling people to work from where they are. And I think the moment you ensure a basic level of business continuity, which happened in a matter of days, not in terms of weeks, I think this whole aspect of, how do we take care of some of the largest concern areas or escalation areas that we were seeing. One was around the area of safety and sanitization. There were about, will I be able to return? Will somebody will come and pick up the products? So the way we have evolved in that, one is, I mentioned earlier the innovations that we have done in this space on no contact delivery, the SOP of the installation guy who will come. So educating people a lot on how we will take care and how it is absolutely safe and how they don't need to worry. But at the same time, also making our policies a bit more relaxed and a bit more consumer friendly in terms of, no questions asked returns in specific categories. Sometimes we don't even pick up stuff and we just reimburse you for the cost that you paid. So a lot has happened, in terms of keeping up with where customers are moving, what are their pain points, what are the barriers which are emerging, and how do we sort of handhold them in this moment? Because like I said earlier, I think as a company, our philosophy has been driven a lot by responsibility in this period. It's not about, are we making the same money as we were making earlier? Are the category gross margins the same as they were earlier? It is really about holding customers at this moment and making sure that they see the best face of e-commerce when they most need it. And that has impacted our customer service policies, that has impacted some of our pricing decisions, that has also enabled some of the, for example, when we were in lockdown space, where only a few categories were allowed to be sold, the way we scaled up those categories, and typically those categories were very low price items. how we evolved our business model to more hyperlocal environment. So people are able to get those things without paying for the, sometimes for the shipment fees, etc. So a lot has evolved just to make sure that we are treating this period with a lot of responsibility and using it in a way to show the best face of e-commerce. So people are, there with us for the longer term.
Interesting. Thanks for that, Vikas. Dilen, I have a similar question, sort of observation for both you and Neha, and I'll start with Dilen first. PepsiCo is a massive company. You are a thought leader within this environment, and I know that a lot of startups are going to be listening to this conversation as well. We've had an explosion of food startups in the world, right? What are the, and coming from a really progressive space, what would be your inputs to, a lot of the food startups that started around, have been around just for a little bit and could have possibly struggled during lockdown? What would be your inputs to them?
I think that, what people are looking for from food has not changed. That would be my first thing. I think what people are looking for is great taste, great quality, refreshment, if it's beverage. The basic requirements from food have not changed. There were aspects, and this is again going back to the paradigm that we're operating on, that there were aspects of, for example, health awareness, etc., that were always going to go up as the country progressed. And those have gotten a bit of an acceleration, right? The basic product of what you're looking for has not changed. And that, I think, provides a lot of solace. So you don't need to cook up completely new recipes and, put immunity boosting into everything, because that's not what consumers are necessarily going to look for across everything that they're doing. I think what has changed and is how you are going to interact with consumers, how they will, in our case, our packaging, for example, is a very important part of our consumer experience, right? The product that you actually consume is it. So we've actually doubled down on aspects of basic consumer experience at the expense of some of the other things that we thought were not as important. And so that to the point that Vikas made, you're really kind of sharp shooting on the consumer's current context, right? And I think that is what will define the winners versus the people who are not that successful. The people who are able to keep a very close pulse on how the consumer is shifting and the context is shifting, and are able to pivot and continue to iterate till they find something, and then they're able to scale that rapidly. So my advice would be that the fundamentals of the consumer haven't changed, and Neha made that point as well. We are seeing that as well. It is an important context, but it is not the only context. Consumers are kind of want to move on. There are other aspects of their life that are important to them, and those need to be serviced, and that fundamental hasn't changed.
May I weigh in on that point from my vantage point? I think fully agree. I think people have been boxed into their houses. It was not a choice. It is not our choice. I think a lot of media narrative has been about doom and gloom, and a lot of brands have participated in that. Completely don't buy into it. So fully agree with the and Ravi. I think festive is going to be great. I have absolutely no doubt. So I think
I'm watching the daily numbers, so I keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah, me too.
Me
I
too,
hope
me
for that.
too.
No, I think that point taken. I think particularly food. From my vantage point, what I see on the searches, let's say on platforms like ours, etc. I mean, we do see an acceleration of a lot of trends. People are wanting to cook a lot more. Yeah, so there is a shift from eating out to cooking on their own. People are looking for much more local stuff. People are looking for much more variety. People are looking for much more gourmet stuff. Yeah, and I think that will spin off a lot of startups. A lot of people, and having spent 20 years in Unilever, I know we keep talking about new trends, etc. But we are never able to truly sort of get into those micro opportunities. As a big company, and I think a lot of startups will find those niches and fill them. This is a global trend that you are seeing. You're seeing that in the US, you're seeing that in Europe, and I think it is only accelerating in India. A lot of associated industries are going to spin off from that in terms of cooking aids and cooking equipment, etc. And again, we see a proliferation of searches and interest in that space. So food, to me, I'm very, very bullish on that sector, and I think there are very exciting times ahead in terms of innovation and sort of changing consumer.
Interest. Yep, got it. Thanks, guys, for being so transparent. Neha, question. My observation. What would be? I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to that. Lots of content creators right now. Everyone wants to start a podcast. That's happening. I have at least 5 people on my calling list who want to do that. It's not more than advice. What would you want to tell them?
In simple words, go for it. There is no better time. Go for it. I think there is a lot of support that organizations like Spotify is offering. So we actually have a tool called Anchor. It's an app which really helps you just make a podcast sitting at home. You don't need any peripheral, right? It's just the phone. Everything is available. Music mixing, making the cover, distributing it to various streaming apps. Everything is literally available at a touch, right? So it's there, it's available. Just go do it. My only advice, Pooja, to them would be that stay in your lane, right? It's very easy for creators when they're seeing just so much creativity around and just so much content around to get derailed, right? But it's important for them keep 2 things in mind. One is like I said earlier, empathy, and the other one is stick to your core, right? So the way I call it is stay in your lane and be a good human, right? Stick to where your USP is, and then
be authentic. So be authentic, you mean, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Thanks for that, Neha. I'm just going to take a quick 1 seconder. I have, I'm thinking of a thought. It would be interesting for us to ask each other questions. And I would like to close this up because, I've seen that we filled up a lot of the questions that we had through this interesting dialogue. And thanks for that. It'd be so cool if Vikas had a question for Dilen, and Dilen had a question for Ravi, and Ravi had a question for Neha, or any of you had a question for me. It'd be very good to just really get it all out there. We're all together. Do you guys agree? Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, should we do that? Does anyone have something that's in their mind already? So thanks for that, Neha. Authenticity is absolutely the way to go, not just in creating content, but also advertising today, right? And I want to move to, and as we close this dialogue, have an honest discussion with all of you. Do we have questions for each other? We're all together right now. We're all looking at each other in our homes. Do we have questions for each other? And anyone has a question, raise their hand. There. Okay, Ravi, over to you. What's the question?
Okay, so there is a slight difference between the business models of the other 3 versus what we in the bank do. In the banks, we have a lot more direct sale component. And we were talking about voice, right? And the sales happened because the salesman was sitting in front of the consumer. And the training that we talked about, it is not about call center because telesales is very different compared to a banking product sale, which is much more involved and a lot more physical connection, emotional connection happens during the physical one-on-one meeting. Now that is over and we are all doing it. So how do you train your sales force to become ability to understand empathy on the voice calls, ability to close the deal on the voice calls? And this is something which we have been asking around, saying that who has got what kind of a tool to sell complicated products, and where you need a lot more personal, physical connect and emotional connect before you sell it. It's easy to talk about call center because we have been training people in the call center on how to handle a specific query, not an initiated call to convert a conversation into a sale.
Yeah, does anyone want to take that? I have an input to it, but I'm going to let you guys decide first.
So I can go, Ravi. Obviously, we don't sell very complicated products, but we do need to sell a lot. And we did start leveraging technology. And as we went through the different pilots that we have put into place, some of them were chat enabled, some of them voice enabled. What we realized was that you've got to keep the most important aspect right up front, right? Because whether it was voice or chat, voice we had a little bit more It was an IVR based solution, but we realized that these calls were short. If you're not getting to the point in the first 30 seconds, then you've kind of lost the sale. So, we kind of said, okay, we are going to take this order from you. Would you want this particular SKU, which we know is the biggest SKU that sells in your store? On the basis of the rotation, that's kind of, so the way in is, I think, extremely important. You need to get there into the first 30 seconds, and that's kind of one big learning. We're still going through that. I don't think we've perfected it at all. But the one learning was that as people get more used to it, they don't need the more long, elaborate understanding of the thing. The other thing that we've learned is that before we switch into a different interface, the earlier interface needs to do the handoff. So the times when the salesman called up and informed the storekeeper that this is how we are going to operate, and this is the reason we are doing this, and if there's any problem, you can always call me. It was far more successful versus somebody who did not have that preamble, because he was not in the right frame of mind. But that's kind of our top learnings kind of at this point of time on how to use sales via a different channel.
Thanks for that. Ravi, did it answer your question? Was it helpful?
The first 30 seconds way in is really, really important.
Okay, awesome. Anyone else has a question?
Now, if I can just respond to that, I mean, not an expert by any means at all, but just as a consumer myself, I can say that I think video enablement, and now we are all getting trained into conducting business on video. I think if all the telecalls from a selling perspective can move to video, I think that will have a significant uptake, in my opinion.
That's great. That's great, guys.
I'll just add, Pooja, to Vikas's point. So, honestly, Ravi, we don't have that problem of, salesmen and then customer service. But I think one of the stakeholders or the salesmen or the influencers for us are the artists themselves, right? We used to leverage the artists through on-ground events, right? Through meetings with their fans. And this used to be very, very often, because it's very important for the consumer to have that tangible experience with the brand. And this was the only way they were sort of connecting physically with the brand, which was with the artist, right? So, and in the given times, there have been no artist gigs, there have been no performances, and absolutely no concerts. So the artist was missing it, and the consumer was also missing it. And we actually just resort to what Vikas said. We took everything online. I mean, there are concerts and there are streaming parties. There are actually even album drops. Like, people are releasing music. The first time they really drop a track is actually happening in a listening party over a platform like Twitter. We actually very recently did a listening party with Diljit, where he actually released new tracks, and he saw unprecedented performance on his music. So I think we've all learned how to sort of connect and get that tangible form in.
Awesome. If nothing else, I have a question, for all of you. We started off with the modern consumer. We have learned through this process that the fundamentals of a consumer have not changed. The process, of course, has. We have included a lot of other important elements like empathy, being consistent, really being agile, listening to the realness of people's problems. So to our community who's listening right now, as thought leaders on this group, what would be your closing remarks? And Neha, may I start with you, please? On, has the consumer changed? If not, how do we do it?
So I think, like you pointed out, Pooja, I don't think the fundamentals of a consumer behavior has changed, but I think two things definitely have changed. One being that they don't want to be just transactional. there is more that is needed, right? So if somebody is looking for a song, it's not that they're looking for a song. They want you to serve them with music, with a playlist, right? At the right moment, at the right time, right? So it cannot be transactional. It needs to be beyond. They need to discover stuff with you, right? And I think the other thing that is happening now is that they are just getting too used to being served, because the brands have started anticipating what the needs are and then serving them at the right moment, at the right time, in the right way. They are getting more and more used to being served, right? And I quote this example very often to our global teams, that there is a concept of thali in India, which is very, very unique to India, right? What's a thali? You don't have to make an effort, right? You are being served everything. You're being served what you like, but you also get to discover a few new things, right? So that is what we do with our playlist, right? We serve you what you like because we know your taste, but there is also a little bit of element of discovery. Hey, that's in your dish. We thought you would like it, right? And that's discovery, and that's what the consumer is wanting, right? And then of course you can have whatever you want first. You can always start with the result first. That's your playlist, but you have a choice. You get to discover and you get to choose where you want to start with. So I think this is where the consumer is going.
Thank you. Vikas, closing remarks from you. Discovery was the key word that came out of there. Keyword for you as well at Flipkart.
Absolutely. And I think let me just start from the original question that you asked. I think what this pandemic has done is that it has really proliferated the customer journeys. I think the number of new people that we are seeing who have interest in buying on e-commerce, number of people that we have seen who are buying maybe something on e-commerce, but now they want to buy many more things on e-commerce. So the customer and the pain points, their triggers and barriers, the way they have proliferated, that is unprecedented and very accelerated. And I think the inherent advantage that digital first brands like Flipkart have is the deep personalization that we can do. So the experience that I can create for a first time user who's coming from a tier 3, tier 4 town versus somebody who's well versed and entrenched in buying online, that fundamental experience that we have constructed is very different. And I'm not talking about just communication, I'm talking about fundamentally how the app appears to you. What are the kind of things that will get recommended to you? What are the payment instruments that you will have? What kind of CX support that you will have at the end of it? We have that benefit of being a digital brand and a digital first brand, but at the same time, this art and science of understanding your customers well, knowing their journeys, knowing their triggers and barriers, and then creating a seamless customer experience across all touch points. Yeah, starting from moment zero to P+1 and P+2. I think that is, to me, the power of technology, power of Martech, and I think the brands which will be which will do that will probably come out better on the other side of this pandemic.
I agree with you, Vikas. Closing remarks from you, Dilen.
I think suffice to say, through the conversation, we have learned one thing, that we are now in the omni reality, right? There is no such thing as digital and physical. It transcends all boundaries. So we are now in the omni reality. And as we've talked, I think the people who are going to win are going to be the people who will understand the consumer really well, right? You need to layer data with understanding, with empathy. Because at the end of the day, what we are doing is we are serving. I think leveraging data as an enabler towards that ultimate goal of serving human beings is going to be the one that will pivot, will define success, right? Going forward. And I think that is what I would urge everybody who is listening to kind of one foot in the past of the good old, human understanding, but one foot in the future where you're always leveraging data to kind of enrich that, with the ultimate objective being what has always been, which is to serve other human beings.
Thank you. I would agree with you entirely. That is the main conversation we have with all of our clients. And I've said this a lot. COVID has been the chief transformation officer for so many businesses. right? And we have one foot in the past, one foot in the future, but we have really accelerated this change. And that is, I would say, one of the good things, the few good things that have come out of this whole process. Closing remarks from you, Ravi?
What we see is very simple. Our purpose was to always help people make better money choices today. Today is all about your transactions, and tomorrow is all about your future investments, assets, or whatever you want to do. And what we have understood and which have accelerated really is what can you do at scale. Earlier, we could have taken our own sweet time on digitizing, say, demat account opening and investment in mutual funds, because that was done more physically, because we thought it would be actually across the board conversation about. Now we need to be digital at scale. We need to be agile at scale. We need to have emotion and empathy at scale, because more you digitize, we don't want to lose the human touch, because banking is a lot more relationship. The last one is we always keep saying that social distance is not equal to emotional distancing. How do you keep that emotional connect with your customers alive during this period? So the challenge for us, which have been more towards physical connect with the customers, is how do you keep the emotional connect alive with the customers? And as long as you do it at scale, you're still there for the future.
I love that. Social distance is not the same as emotional distance. I really like that. A great way to wrap up this conversation, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was a great conversation for me. I really enjoyed all of your inputs, and I'm sure so did everyone else that is listening in and seeing in. So thank you again, and have a great day. May we all come out of this stronger, wiser, and better. All right, wrapping up. Thanks, guys. This was really good. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation.